The very idea of hinting at a conspiracy or a false flag event is ridiculed and laughed off and considered to be ridiculous. And yet this has happened time and time again in history. Most of it isn't documented, but there are certain cases where it was explicitly stated. And one of those places is with Operation Northwoods.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the No Way Jose podcast. I am your host, Jose Galison. Today, we'll be talking all things Operation Gladio. We'll be joined today by Colonel Towner Watkins. This will be our first time talking, and it'll be a first time doing an episode dedicated to Gladio only, which is actually kind of surprising to reflect upon, considering this show we typically cover. But with that, let's go get the Colonel in here. I'm looking forward to talking to her. Hey, how you doing?
Great. How are you?
Thanks. Good. Glad. Yeah, I'm. It's been, I think, kind of a long time coming. We were talking before the show. I've had a handful of people over the different times I've murmured Gladio out of my mouth that have evoked your name, and so finally here we are. And like I said, hadn't really ever done a Gladio episode, so it only makes sense. Now I can't help but notice. I talked a little bit. Me and you both have military service, and I thought that maybe it'd be an interesting place to start off with. Because me and you had similar but very different experiences from my understanding of your career. I was listening to William's show. You ended up, I don't know if it was full bird or light colonel, I can't recall.
Colonel.
Full bird? Okay. All right. Because, sometimes people say colonel and they mean a light colonel, just kind of colloquially. But, I mean, I don't know, maybe colonels get offended by that. I don't know, but I know that is a thing lieutenant colonels do. Anyways, I was an enlisted man, so many in this show know. Hell, even my name is a pseudonym, because when I started the show, I was active duty military. My name's Josh Galison, I'll say it. It's like, if anything, whatever. I keep the pseudonym for funsies. I joined active duty military. I did 11 years, and then I did a couple years reserves after that. I joked the reserves don't really count, so whatever. It's kind of a joke. It was really just a financial gap to try to bridge it from one to the other back to civilian life. But I did the enlisted route. I was a crew chief. I actually signed originally as a SEER instructor. I failed out in selection. I made it near the end. Actually, surprisingly, no one, I think, from my class made it through selection. So that's the recidivism rate for SEER instructor for you. But I got reclassed over to crew chief on the KC-135, and I spent pretty much my entire career over at MacDill Air Force Base. I did about 6 years as an isochronal crew chief, like a year on wheel and tire, a handful on the flight line, did some office stuff here and there. But, just kind of worked, was a crew chief. And I heard you say you were a crew chief, so you did start as enlisted. No? You turned, not crew chief, you turned wrenches. So that's maybe I jumped to the conclusion there, but go ahead.
I turned wrenches. I spent 8 years in aircraft maintenance, 6 years on active duty, and 2 years for a civilian airline with my A&P license.
Oh, okay, cool. So you're a better mechanic than I am. I never got my A&P.
I definitely worked for a living for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, that doesn't count when you're military working for a living. But it's interesting. You did the full 30. I bailed before I got out. I would assume that you feel. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I guess I don't watch your show religiously. I don't know exactly where you're coming from. I know particularly myself. I got to part of one of many reasons why I got out. I mean, the real life reasons. I kind of just didn't agree with the mission. Disillusioned. It's kind of a slog, kind of soul sucking every day to continue to do something for a mission you don't support. I find everything we've done I don't know. When I joined, I legitimately was stupid enough to think I'm going to go kill Hajis, and that's going to somehow make the people in my life around me freer and more safe. I grew up, as every man should, and learned that that's a crock of shit. And was it Smedley Butler? War is a racket. And I mean, not that I saw combat or anything. I'm not even like really. I feel almost weird complaining. If anything, I was a crew chief, so it was, if anything, it kind of almost, I feel like, sanitizes it, because I'm just turning a crew chief, or turning a wrench. But at the end of the day, you're like, yeah, but I'm turning the wrench on a jet that, if I was deployed, would probably be refueling a fighter jet that might be dropping bombs on people. So it's like you are part of this cycle of death. And you discovered about Gladio, and it's like, I don't know, it kind of really is one of those missing pieces of the puzzle that you go, holy moly, what is going on here? I mean, you did much longer than me, so I guess I'm just kind of curious where your mind's been at with all of this. I mean, hell, you went full-on officer and everything, so and here we are.
Let me ask you first, when were you at MacDill?
I joined in like 2010, so I probably didn't get there until roughly 2011ish. So, and then I was there. I'm still in this area. I still live here, but I don't like I'm not on that base anymore. But still, because I met my wife and everything nearby here. So
I was there from 1999 to 2002. I was assigned to U.S. Central Command over 9/11. So that was a very interesting assignment for me. So let me just start by saying that I initially joined the military to get my degree. I originally came from a very poor family, and no one had ever went to college. My mom and dad had never graduated from high school. So it was a goal of mine that I set for myself. And the only way that I was going to do that was by joining the military. And I kind of did it on a dare. My dad told me that there was no way in hell I was ever going to make it in the military. So that was kind of like the click for me. And I loved being in aircraft maintenance. It's all I ever wanted to do. When I applied for a ROTC scholarship, the only thing that I wanted to do was be a maintenance officer, because our maintenance officers sucked. They were, you know very well, they're education majors, PE majors, and they really suck. And so my thinking at the time was, I can do a much better job. And I looked at all the guys that I worked with, and they just wanted to be maintenance people. They just wanted to fix aircraft, and no one was taking care of them. And that bothered me to no end. So when the Air Force decided to make me a personnel officer after I graduated from Indiana University, I was mad. I was really mad. So my mission after that was to spend the next 22 years using the personnel system to help people. And I became one of the biggest pains in the butt to the people at the Air Force Personnel Center, because I was out in the field helping people. And I would help them write BCMRs when the system screwed them. And the commanders loved me because I took care of the people, but my peers didn't necessarily like me because I knew how to get around the system. And I like doing that. I'm a rebel at heart. I've always been a rebel at heart. And so being a support officer allows you to be exposed to a lot more mission areas than you would be if you're like a space officer or a flyer, because you fly one aircraft, you're in one command the entire time, that type of thing. So you're in one community. I mean, you may be a fighter pilot and go to USAFE or ACC, but you're still in that community. So I got to see all kinds of mission areas. And I was stationed at San Vito, Italy, where it was an intel mission. I was at the Pentagon. I was at Andrews. I was all over the place. And so I just got to see a lot of the Air Force. I got selected to go to Air War College after I left MacDill. I thoroughly enjoyed that because I'm an avid reader. I only read nonfiction. I probably at this point have over 600 books. And it's just what I like to do. However, as you just pointed out, what I now realize is professional military education is more of a room that they put you in and they give you lots of information, but it's just this information. You're only allowed to look at this. And, I was the good officer that every time the chief of staff released the 10 recommended reading books every year, I read every single one of them. I own all of them for like about a 15-year span, and fought the good fight and decided to retire. Well, I was medically retired, actually, and at the 30-year point, coincidentally. Mm-hmm. And so in doing all of that, the first couple of years I was retired, I did a lot of reading, and it's all nonfiction, but it was still along the same lines of reinforcing what I thought I already knew. So about 3 years ago, I picked up a book that was written by Anthony Sutton. And Anthony Sutton wrote a trilogy of books that, because my primary education, higher education, was in business. I have a business bachelor's degree. I have a business master's degree. And then I also got the master's degree from Air War College. And so I feel like I'm fairly well read at this point. And Anthony Sutton, in a very well documented trilogy, talked about how the Bolshevik Revolution, the Hitler's rise to power, Nazism, and FDR's campaign were all funded by the exact same people. And that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. And so then I read Cynthia Chung's book, The Empire in Which the Black Sun Never Sets. And basically, now at this point, I still don't know anything about Gladio. And her book is about how the Fabian Society in the late 1800s talked about one world government, talked about the Hegelian dialect, how creating the Hegelian, and Anthony Sutton talks about this as well in a different book, creating the Hegelian left called communism and the Hegelian right called Nazism allowed what I refer to as the international syndicate, this group of puppet masters that operate on an international scale, and they're all criminals, which is why I call it a syndicate, that they manipulate everything. They fund everything, they manipulate everything, and their final goal is one world government. And it will be a fascist government. It will be a dictatorship of everyone, of the useless eaters, the rest of us. And again, as you just articulated, being a military officer, and whether you're on the front lines or not, you are a target. You have given an oath of which we will all uphold to give our life for the country. That is our mission. Whether you break things, kill people, or support those who do, those are your missions. And we all fit in one of those three categories. And I took my oath very seriously. And so, again, you're sitting here going, wait a minute. How did I miss this entire big elephant in the room? And so, taking Cynthia's book, I read Joseph Farrell's book called Fascist International. And in there, he talked about a thing called stay behind units. Again, I have 6 different degrees. If I've not heard of something, it's very unusual. Not that I'm an expert in everything, because I am not.
No one is, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, that sounds awful, because the context was that it was a military type.
This is your realm. Yeah, military history. This is your jam.
I'm like, wait a minute. So I just got on the internet and typed in stay behind units. And I see Operation Gladio. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's a military operation, and I don't know anything about it. So I bought Paul Williams' book, who I've interviewed twice. Wonderful man.
He's passed, hasn't he? Or am I thinking of somebody else?
No, he's still alive.
Oh, he's still alive. Okay, cool. Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else and some other author.
Yeah, he's an amazing, very intelligent man. And he wrote Operation Gladio, that's the name of his book, in 2015. And he had written for the New York Times, the Washington Post. He'd appeared on every major news network because of other things that he had researched. And his phone stopped ringing the day the book was released. So he knew that everything that he said in there was true. Not that he would have said anything that's not true, but it reinforced for him the importance of what he had stumbled across. So in reading his book, you quickly learn the history of Operation Gladio and where it started. And that primarily all of the post-World War II intelligence agencies, whether it's the German BND, the SIFAR, the CIA, the KCIA. I didn't even know the Korean intelligence agency was called the KCIA because the CIA set it up. So
many such cases.
yeah, exactly. And so and Mossad, the MI6, the only existing intelligence agency today that preceded World War II was MI6. And they're the granddaddy of everything. And there's a lot of people out there that you hear every day. And as soon as I started posting about this, everybody jumped on. Oh, it's all the Jews. Oh, it's all the Jesuits. Oh, it's all the Catholics. Oh, it's all of this. And I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's not all of anybody. It's a whole bunch of people. But they've used every religion. If you go back and you actually do research on the Vietnam War, well before the war, before we ever got involved in the war, the Catholic Church was in northern Vietnam as missionaries. And they conducted at the beginning of our involvement in Vietnam, a mass 1 million large forced migration of people that had spent the last generations, hundreds of years in a single village in the north. They put them on a ship and they put them on airplanes and forced them to move to the south because they wanted to prop up a fake election of DM who was a Catholic in the south because they were the CIA's guy on the ground. And they did it by psychological operations. The actual Catholic Church itself was involved in a psychological operation with the CIA to force relocate people. And if you take that and you fast forward to today, what's happening? The forced migration of all of these people in countries we destabilized. And so you start seeing patterns. Patterns were everywhere. So getting back to stay behind units, I then had to go back and rethink because, your brain's wired that you think you know all of this stuff. And I had to basically kind of shake it all up and put all of the pieces that I know in a different order. And once I did that, the patterns were like glowing like neon signs to me, because you go back prior to Vietnam War to the Korean War. Well, guess what? There were stay behind units used there. We actually provoked the Korean War. It was not the Soviet Union.
Also many such cases.
Yes. And so in all of the election interference that everybody's struggling with right now, you're like, oh my God, the CIA was involved in election interference in the United States. Well, here's a newsflash for you. They killed RFK. That's election interference.
Yep.
He had just secured the Democrat primary with the California win, and that night they murdered him. But that wasn't where they started. The CIA was created in 1947, and the very first election they interfered with was in 1948 in Italy. So they have been interfering in every significant election since 1948, every one. And they've conducted over 90 successful coups around the world, overthrowing government. And it's very important for people to understand why they do it, because you would think, oh, well, it's just a power thing, or it's just that, or it's not. In every single case, the very first thing I did was go to the CIA's website, because they list an entire array of resources that country has. Well, why would they do that if they're just an intelligence collection organization, and with some intelligence they do some covert operations based on intelligence, right? Why would they keep a list of all the resources? Well, they keep a list of all the resources for the international syndicate, because what they have done over this time is they hired geologists under the guise of USAID or the Peace Corps or any of these other fronts for the CIA. And they send these geologists who are there to, to help the poor people. And they're looking for gold. They're looking for oil. They're looking for ore. They're looking for every single rubber trees. We find Goodrich and Goodyear in Vietnam because they had massive amounts of rubber production. And so I'm like, okay, so if it's all about resources and they find resources in a particular country, and then all of a sudden that country is labeled a communist sympathizer, and then they use these covert forces, well, where are they getting all their money? Well, because none of this is paid for out of the appropriated funds, because all of their operations are covert. And they do have a covert budget, but it would never cover the massive amount of operations they've done. So then I went back to the beginning with Paul Williams, and he lays out the perfect description of how they do it. They do it 3 ways: drug trafficking, human trafficking, and weapons trafficking. It's like this little wheel that has 3 spokes. And in order to keep the wheel of Operation Gladio rolling down the tracks, anybody that's a maintenance person knows that the wheel has to have grease. Well, that's where blackmail comes in. The way you keep this rolling down the road where nobody finds out that it even exists is by controlling the people involved in the production of this wheel. And they blackmail people into silence. And if they can't blackmail you into silence, they will kill you. So that took me back to just after, well, it was actually during the war. And 2 fundamental events happened, one in Asia and one in Europe. The one in Asia was orchestrated by Colonel Paul Helliwell. And Colonel Paul Helliwell was a military attaché. And whether or not he was actually in the military, he wore a military uniform and he had a military rank. But that does not always mean that he was actually military, because he was also CIA. Mm-hmm. And they do pretend to be military officers.
Yep.
And so Paul Helliwell was the military attaché to Chiang Kai-shek. And Chiang Kai-shek was not only fighting the Japanese, but he was also fighting Mao for control of China. And just so your audience knows, because I don't know if you've covered it or not, China had fought 2 wars, the Boxer Wars, from the British using their colony in India, importing opium into China because they were exploiting China's resources as well. Mm-hmm. And they were doing it by the influx of opium into China that had been grown in India.
Golden Triangle. Yep.
Yeah. So Mao's really pissed off about that. And he did not want any drugs in China at all. So Chiang Kai-shek paid for his warlord civil war against Mao with the opium. So he becomes the biggest opium dealer in all of China. Well, Paul Helliwell is watching during World War II, Chiang Kai-shek funding his war effort, this covert war against Mao with opium. So he picks up the phone to Alan Dulles and says, hey, dude, you know that Gladio program that you're trying to set up? I've got a perfect way to fund it. And if we traffic opium, we will have black market cash in order to pay for all the weapons that we're going to supply our Gladio operators with. And if we continue this war effort with all these weapons being shipped in, we can skim weapons off the top, not only for our use, but to sell on the black market as well. So they have this entire plan. And oh, by the way, every country you go in with this war, whether it was Korea or Vietnam or Afghanistan, you displace people. Well, what can we do with the people? Well, we can traffic the people. Modern day slavery. So this is like the perfect bingo card for them. And so Mao eventually kicks Chiang Kai-shek out of China and puts him in Burma. And there's a whole bunch of people involved in this, that people's names who they don't even know. I mean, we don't know them. They're not in the history book. One of the people that I stumbled across was named William Pawley. Have you ever heard of him?
Can't say I have.
Most people have never heard of him. But when you look him up, Oh my God, it'll make your head explode. Polly Island in South Carolina is named after his family. And he's a millionaire. But he's not a self-made millionaire. He gets given a lot of stuff, like for Curtiss aircraft, for fighters and all kinds of different sized aircraft for Southeast Asia. So he sets up production over there, and he gives Chiang Kai-shek his own Air Force. And we have Sea Supply, the Paul Helliwell company, that gives him his own Navy. So now we've got a way to ship drugs all over the world. Weapons there, drugs back. So Burma gets tired of, because they moved him to Burma, Chiang Kai-shek. The Burmese government gets tired of this bullshit, and they're like, you're out of here. So the CIA kind of scratches their head and they go, oh, look, there's this little island over here called Formosa. Let's move Chiang Kai-shek over to Formosa, and we can set him up on this island. And it's actually an island chain of about 7 islands. Well, that island called Formosa is now called Taiwan. So most people do not realize, and I certainly didn't. And again, I have a master's degree in this. I went over to that area. I went to Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand during my Air War College. So again, I think I kind of know something. I didn't know a damn thing. So Formosa changes its name to Taiwan, and Chiang Kai-shek says that his KMT army, that was the name of his army, is going to be his political party. So you can't criticize the democracy, because that's a political party now. And he sets up this thing called the Political Warfare Cadre Academy. That's in a group of schools that train terrorists around the world. The 101 terrorist training was School of Americas in Latin America. The graduate level is the Warfare Center, Political Warfare Center in Taiwan. And then the graduate, the PhD, was a year-long training program in Israel that a lot of drug lords end up going to from Latin America. So those are your 3 tiers of terrorist training.
Sorry, I couldn't help but laugh that the granddaddy of it's in Israel. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I know we mentioned that. I'm not one who thinks it's all the Jews, but let's be real. Yeah. I mean, Israel is a component here.
But again, the irony in all of this that most people miss is the MI6 being the granddaddy, and who gave birth to Israel? The Brits.
MI6, yeah, Brits.
So, again, I find almost every one of these roads eventually lead back to.
Also, sorry not to cut you off, but you mentioned the CIA created in 1947, Gladio in 1948. When was Israel founded? So, yeah.
Oh, again, and that's another interesting point. But so just to finish up the Chiang Kai-shek, so he immediately declares martial law. There are declassified State Department cables to Washington, D.C. from the ambassador in Taiwan saying that Chiang Kai-shek is bayoneting Formosans in the street right in front of the embassy that come to the embassy pleading for help to get Chiang Kai-shek out of their country, not knowing that we're the ones that put him there. And so he declares martial law immediately. I did not know that from the time they set up Chiang Kai-shek in Formosa until mainland China was recognized, they lived under martial law. Chiang Kai-shek was a dictator in Taiwan for about 40 years. And we were told the entire time it was a democracy. Even General General MacArthur came back to the United States and testified in front of Congress that he had been there. It was a democracy. It was a success story. This is like the best thing since sliced
Free
bread.
people of Taiwan.
Yes, the same Taiwan that we're going to send people to die for today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the second important thing about that time frame was a secret meeting during the war in northern Italy. That meeting was between Allen Dulles and General Eisenhower's chief logistician, Major General at the time, Lyman Lemetsker. Now, I know you played Northwood
Yeah.
in your intro, so you know who he is.
Yeah.
So you're going to understand with your military background the importance of what I'm about to say. Lyman Leminsker, the chief logistics officer for all of Italy, or for all of Europe, for Eisenhower. Now, you tell me if you're going to set up a stay behind unit concept throughout the entire area of Europe, and that stay behind unit has caches of weapons buried with guns, explosives, comm equipment, and money. Is that a logistics issue? You have to arrange the transportation of all of those items to all of these countries. You have to figure out where you're going to stash them, and then you have to keep track of where they're all at. That's a logistic issue. So Allen Dulles and General Eisenhower, who becomes President Eisenhower and conducts a bunch of coups using Operation Gladio,
warn us about that military-industrial complex while he's at it.
He was telling you what he did. He wasn't warning us.
I know.
Yeah. So he sends Lyman Leminsker down to the secret meeting. Well, the guy they met with was General Wolfe. General Wolfe was a Nazi. He was in charge of Operation Gladio. Do you know? Well, he was in charge of Hitler's stay behind unit.
The werewolf units.
The werewolf unit. And it's General Wolfe.
Yeah.
Okay. So, General Wolfe's Eastern Front guy was Reinhard Gehlen. Reinhard Gehlen is an SS general, and his deputy for most of the training of the stay behind units was Otto Skorzeny. Otto Skorzeny is saved at Nuremberg and put in Paris, where they initially stood up NATO and then later moved once he gets discovered because of his big scar. They find out who he is and that he was a Nazi and how the hell did you get through Nuremberg, blah, blah, blah. So they hide him in Spain. Well, no one went to Spain at the time because Franco, who was a dictator, and they were very fascist at the time. So he was safe there. They were hiding him in Spain. So this meeting was General Wolfe negotiating who was going to get rat-lined out of Europe, what Nazis they were going to save, and how they were going to do it. In exchange for doing that, they turned over the plans for all of the stay-behind units that were in German-occupied territories, France, the Netherlands, Germany, Hungary, all of those countries, Italy. So now they've got the plans of where all these are at. So Allen Dulles then arranges that, and they agree that Reinhard Gehlen is going to be kind of the transition guy. So Allen Dulles dresses him up in a 4-star U.S. Army uniform, flies him into Washington, D.C. They spend a couple of weeks there debriefing. He goes back. He, of course, never makes it to Nuremberg. He's quote unquote denazified. And guess where he ends up? He begins running the Gehlen organization, which becomes Germany's B&D, which is their CIA. So now you have a Nazi in West Germany that's supposedly denazified running their intelligence apparatus. And you have Allen Dulles, who ends up as the CIA director, running our Gladio program. And then you have all of these intelligence functions post-World War II with these new governments in France and West Germany and Italy, because now they're supposedly all denazified, Greece, all of these countries. All of the Sweden, Norway, Finland, William Colby, who goes on to be CIA director, set up all the stay-behind units in Sweden, Norway, and Finland. So you have this entire European stay-behind network. This entire thing was set up and justified by these critters as anti-communist stay-behind units. So as soon as the Soviet Unions ran over the Volga Gap, they were going to fall in behind them and, fight. Well, the problem with that logic is post-World War II, depending on who you read, the Soviet Union had lost 25 to 50 million people as a result of the war. Most of their warfighting capability was gone. It had been bombed. It had been destroyed. There was no communist people coming over the Volga Gap at all. None. Couldn't even have happened if they wanted to. So why did they set them up? Well, they set them up for one reason and one reason only: to control their own people and to commit domestic terror events to terrorize their own people. And why would they do that? Because chaos begets control. And so at this point, I'm about a year into this research project, and my poor husband has to listen to me. And every time I find another one of those, oh my God moments, how stupid could I?
That's what we have podcasts for.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't even started doing podcasts at this point. So my husband got the full vetting of this.
Yeah. I mean, my wife's the same way. Now it's I used to talk to her a lot about this stuff, and now I don't have to bother. And we're better. We're both better off for it.
Well, we talk about it all the time. My husband's like best support person that I could have ever found. But anyway,
I love my wife. She just does not care about this stuff.
He comes in one day, and he's I'm busy doing my research and stuff, and he's like, "Hey, do you remember that comedy that we used to watch called Get Smart?" And I'm looking at him going, I'm kind of busy. Yeah, I remember it. I watched it all the time. And he goes, "Do you remember what the two organizations were called on that TV show?" And I'm like, "No." He goes, "Chaos and Control." And I'm like, son of a bitch. Are you kidding me? And he goes, I'm like, "You're right. Chaos was the bad guys and control was the good guys. It's all a psychological operation. Every bit of this is a psychological operation against the government, against us."
Yep.
And I said, and so the moral of the story is the name of the show, Get Smart. They're telling us to get smart, to figure out what the hell is going on and not allow ourselves to be controlled by their chaos. And that to me was like one of the biggest light bulb moments for me of how long this psychological operation had been going on. Which then of course we have to fast forward to Operation Northwood, since we already mentioned it. And I'm sure your audience probably all knows that there's a laundry list of chaos options on there, like flying drone aircraft into buildings, bombing buildings and blaming it on the Cubans. And so that is a document that should be framed on everyone's wall, that this is your government. So the guy that set up Operation Gladio logistically throughout all of Europe, and I'll make the argument that we have them here, that set that entire program up, gets to be Eisenhower's chief of staff, or Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Joint Chiefs of Staff, yeah. So,
Kennedy, when he's presented this, basically fires Lyman Lemonsker by not giving him his second tour. But do you know where Lyman Lemonsker got assigned after the Joint Chiefs of Staff?
The old NATO.
And where is Operation Gladio controlled from? NATO. So a year later, JFK's dead. And I would argue that JFK's assassination is an Operation Gladio. And the reason why I argue that is because Otto Skorzeny was the pivotal point in all of this. It was a logistical A4 contract out of the Air Force that paid for building Spain's Air Force bases over there. And Otto Skorzeny opened a construction company with a partner, and he got every single one of those contracts. Those contracts were money laundering to pay Otto Skorzeny to train people, and he trained them in assassinations, kidnapping, and torture. And he did it on the island of Sardinia in Italy, on the Canary Islands, and on the border of France in Spain. So
I know this wasn't him, but I think the Cuban exiles, they were training in swamps in Florida, I believe, is what obviously it's a separate thing, but yeah.
Well, but it is the same thing.
Well, separate but the same, but not him specifically, but yeah.
I'm going to, but he came in contact with them. And I am also going to argue that the Cuban exiles are our Gladio, or at least were. Because,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, because where do you find the Cuban exiles involved in JFK's assassination? They were involved in the overthrow of Nixon. They were involved in the bombing of Ambassador Ladierre, a car bomb detonated in Washington, D.C., that not only killed him, he was the ambassador that got stranded here from Chile when we overthrew their government. And an American that was his aide was also killed in that car bomb. And the Cuban exiles, 2 of them went to prison for that car bomb. They launched the downing of the Cuban aircraft that had taken off from Venezuela on the way back to Cuba with the, I think it was an archery team. Those Cuban exiles took that plane down. The Cuban exiles, they were in Angola, they were in Nicaragua, they were in just about every coup. They went to Vietnam. So I would argue that there is more than enough evidence to say that the Cuban exiles were our Gladio.
I mean, they were Watergate, RFK, JFK.
Yes.
I mean, I know them. There's some I'm not thinking of that they totally were involved in. But yeah, they were like basically any op during that period of time. You could almost damn near guarantee there was a Cuban exiles, at least tangentially connected.
And they were our Gladio, and they were trained directly by the CIA, just like every other Gladio. The training of the Italian Gladio were done by the Italian government. The training, but Otto Skorzeny was kind of the training advisor for everybody. So, and you find Otto Skorzeny in the overthrow of the Congo, Patrice Lumumba. He was the one that orchestrated the plan on how that was going to go down. You find him and he traveled routinely to Latin America, where we have Operation Condor. Yep. And Operation Condor is the kissing cousin of Operation Gladio.
Yeah.
Operation Gladio, just for the people that knows, is a generic term now for all of Europe, but it was specifically related to Italy because Portugal's program was called Agenter Press. The Turkey program was called the Grey Wolves. So everybody had a particular pet name for theirs, but because Italy is the only country that actually did an in-depth investigation into that program and revealed it for the first time on August 2nd, 1990. And you're going to understand when I say this next part. So here I am reading Paul Williams' book, and he talks about Prime Minister Andreotti getting up in front of the Italian Senate and saying, yeah, there's a thing called Operation Gladio, and yeah, it was being ran by the government, and yeah, we killed a bunch of people. He eventually goes to jail. So he did that on the 2nd of August, and most people would not remember that date, just like in generic reading. Well, the reason why I remember that date is because that's the day I flew in from JFK Airport to the Rome airport for a 3-year assignment in Italy. I arrived there on the 2nd of August. Do you know what else happened on the 2nd of August?
Can't tell you.
Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. So if you're Europe and you know that everything that you've just spent the last, I don't know, by that time, 40 years, is going to blow up in your face, what would you do? Another false flag? So the week before, April Gillespie, I think was her name, the envoy to Iraq for the U.S. government, she gives Saddam Hussein the go-ahead and invade Kuwait. And it just so happens to be scheduled on the 2nd of August. The same day Andreotti is going to get up in front of the entire. So everybody's eyes are glued on Andreotti, right? And NATO now uses the excuse of, oh my God, we're going to war. We can't talk about Gladio. Nobody can be made available in our PR departments because they're planning a war. Well, the PR department doesn't doesn't conduct the war. So why can't I talk to them? Well, no, we're busy. So it was the perfect avenue to steal the news cycle. And that's what this is all about. Anytime something happens in government that is bad for the deep state, there's going to be a false flag. There's going to be a distraction that they orchestrate in order to control the news cycle. And so I got off that airplane in the Rome airport, and I had a choice of a couple of different places to go. But of course, who would not want to go to Italy? And I get off the airplane with my daughter, and there's like, for every person, civilian in the airport, there's like 5 guys with AK-47s. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? What did I do? What's wrong with you people? And I found out, talking to the customs person, that they were on high alert because a few years earlier, the Rome airport had been bombed. And I'm like, holy crap. And so, of course, the rest is history. But that date just kind of stuck in my brain because it was such a devastating day for me to land and find out that we're basically going to war any minute. So that's kind of the beginning of this whole research project for me. And after I kind of found out and had a good footing, I thought was the makeup of all of this, I started going conflict by conflict, country by country. I have now, I think I'm up to 91 successful coups. I read in Peter Dale Scott's book, and William Bloom wrote a book called Killing Hope, that there's been over 400 attempts at overthrowing governments, 91 that I can attest to, that were successful coups, all conducted by these operatives. And so I started a project, and it's linked on my Twitter feed. I do spaces every day at 4:00. I started off, we do books now because we're doing Colombia right now. But we started off regional. So we looked at Operation Condor in Latin America. We went into the Caribbean. We looked at all of those coups. Was there a CIA element of it? Yes, in every single case. We went to Central America. Then we went to South America. And then we went to Europe. They killed Otto Moro. They killed Olaf Palme. They tried to kill Charles de Gaulle over 20 times. They shot up his car. They tried to poison him because he was for peace in Algeria, and the French deep state didn't want that not to be a slave colony. So he had to go. And so we looked at a bunch of different regime changes, operations that had went on in Europe, to include Ukraine, both in 2004 and 2014, both CIA setups. And then we went to Asia, and we looked at Malayo, and the British overthrew them, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, all of those. How many attempts had we tried to take out China? We found that in Nepal, the whole Uyghur situation, that entire thing is a lie. We set up terrorist training camps in Nepal, and we were training Uyghurs, Muslim Uyghurs, to attack China, and from the inside. And I had never heard of this, but in Tibet, we flew a whole bunch of Tibetans into Colorado to an abandoned World War II base in the mountains. You look it up, 100% true. We flew them in there to the airport in Denver. We took blacked out buses up to the top of the mountain in the middle of the night. They were there for months learning how to be terrorists by the CIA. We took them back down to the buses, put them on an airplane, and flew them back to Tibet for them to create their own stay-behind network to attack China. So now we've got Taiwan over here launching attacks constantly into China, Chiang Kai-shek. We've got the Tibetans inside of China doing it. And we've got the Nepal terrorist training the Uyghurs to attack China. This is all CIA. So we've surrounded China just like we did with Russia, with Georgia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, all of them, every one of them. And Ukraine, the New York Times, to my amazement, like a year ago in February, actually has a very long article saying that in the immediate aftermath of 2014, the CIA went over there with tons of people, set up like 20 secret underground facilities. And they said they did it to protect Ukraine against Russia. But oddly enough, those underground facilities are not along the Russian border, which is where you would think they would have them, right? No, they're along the Donbass region that is now still technically inside of Ukraine. Well, why would they line those units, in the CIA sites in the Donbass region, on the outside of the Donbass region in Ukraine? Because they were going to use them as stay-behinds to attack the Donbass region to bait Russia into a war, which is exactly what happened.
Hell, even I was just thinking about it as you were talking, actually. I remember during the recent attack, the 12-day war stuff, there were reports of almost caches and you could almost say stay-behind type stuff from Israel in Iran. And now that I'm looking back, I'm recalling Iran notably actually had a very good relationship with Germany during that period of time. So that might be a little bit of a shot in the foot for them if I'm thinking about that, because I wouldn't be surprised if some of those logistic components that came into play there have been maybe sitting in wait for damn near that long. Because kind of, I guess what I'm driving at here a little bit is, and you kind of did as well. I think the CIA very well may have been essentially created for Gladio, essentially, or
100%.
Because it's like we look at this. I mean, we were talking about the werewolf units and how we have all these Nazis, Operation Paperclip. Like this is all just one. Like this is where you hear people talking about like when they say the Nazis won. This is what they're talking about. They took the essentially the reconstruction, the reassessing, retaking things like the after period. Some people took that infrastructure of what they had, and that was us. We took that and said that's ours now. And I think along with that came some of the things like some of the debauchery that tends to happen in war. A lot of the whorehouses and maybe some of the other darker underbelly elements, and that kind of came into the other child trafficking component. I think we probably took over those same networks as well in the aftermath of World War II, and that bleeds into what we see now. And I think that's why you do see when you get into some of the really spooky territory, you do really find it always seems to swirl around Nazi symbolism and such. And I think that's probably for a reason.
So my take in all of this is the Fabian Society in the late 1800s said there's going to be three wars. And to me, the third war started in the immediate aftermath of World War II. And all we did was transfer an overt war to a covert war. So we took all of those Nazis, buried them throughout the world. There were Nazis in Japan. There were Nazis in Egypt. There were Nazis in Latin America. There were Nazis everywhere. And everybody focuses on Paperclip. Paperclip was such a small drop in the bucket. There were freaking Nazis everywhere. We ratlined them all over the world. They were in Africa. They were in, like I said, South America, Central America. And they popped up repeatedly over the years in these operations. You take in Chile, when we went in there we were in there twice. Salvador Allende scared the hell out of everybody because he was a nationalist. And so when he ran for president of Chile the first time, the CIA went in there and made sure he didn't win. They have like what do you call that, where you have the top two candidates, like if you have three candidates, like Alaska has right now.
Preferred voting or whatever.
Yeah,
is that what we're talking about? Yeah, it's like preferred choice or whatever. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so that's kind of the way theirs was. So they made sure that he didn't get in the top three. So when the next time he ran, they go back in there and they buy the newspaper. They take over. And who was behind that? Well, at the time, a company called ITT, International Telegram and Telephone Company. PepsiCo had the exclusive rights for distribution there. And most people don't know PepsiCo had a navy bigger than most countries. They bought like a whole bunch of the Soviet stuff. And so you also had Anaconda mining, because Chile was a copper mine bonanza. They were the largest copper supplier in the 70s of the world. And so those companies knew that Salvador Allende wanted to solve the labor issue, because they were basically treating the Chileans like slaves. And they were killing Chileans in the mines and blah, blah, blah. And they knew they were using ITT to spy, because they controlled the entire nation's telephone operations. So he was going to kick ITT out and take over their telephones. He was going to allow labor unions, legitimate ones, not the pretend ones that the CIA sets up for these companies. And he was going to open competition to other companies besides PepsiCo. So that's a no-go for these guys, the international syndicate. So they pick up the phone to the CIA and say, get rid of him. So they go in and they basically try to sabotage the election. He gets in the top two. He eventually wins. And then they spent like $5 million trying to buy off senators, because he has to go for approval of the Senate, because it's like a parliamentarian kind of system. And so they try to buy enough senators to not confirm him. Well, that doesn't work either. So he actually gets elected, and he actually starts implementing these changes. And then they murdered him. And ITT, PepsiCo, and Anaconda at the time had been talking with Nixon and said, you have to, ITT offered to pay for the operation. And you find a lot of these international corporations, they don't, even if they have a headquarters in the United States, they don't work for us. They're not our company.
I'm kind of a tech idiot. So this ITT thing, I'm assuming it's probably something similar, kind of akin to like the Promise software scandal, where Robert Maxwell was involved with, where there was some sort of backdoor to where they were able to, essentially see what was going on, some sort of spying apparatus.
ITT shared all communications with the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
But there's even a better one. Have you ever heard of Crypto AG?
No.
Okay.
I heard you on Williams stuff, but that's the extent of what I've heard about it.
So, but some people have actually heard that just in other research that they've done. Crypto AG is kind of the linchpin to this whole thing. Crypto AG was a encrypted communication system that was like at the State Department levels. So during World War II, they used the guy that created Crypto AG, the company, his ability to hack into encrypted stuff during World War II. Okay, so he's working with the NSA, he's a brainiac. So the CIA gets the idea, at the time it was the OSS, gets the idea, hey, we're going to set you up a company in Switzerland, that place where everybody thinks is neutral. And we want you to call your company Crypto AG. So you go over there and we're basically going to set you up in operations. And we want you to create a backdoor to all of your boxes that you're going to sell these countries. So the countries, over 120 countries around the world, thinking it's coming from an independent company in Switzerland, buys Crypto AG devices. They put them in the executive branches of 120 countries, and they put a receiver, communicator, in every single embassy of that country. So this shit is everywhere. The CIA is actually in business with the German BND, Reinhard Gehlen, the Nazi. So Alan Dulles and Reinhard Gehlen basically co-own, and officially they will eventually co-own it. So this guy that created Crypto AG, he gets old. He has a son. They don't trust his son. So Reinhard Gehlen and Alan Dulles says, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up a fake company. We're going to sell Crypto AG to this fake company, and we're going to split the profits. So literally the CIA now owns it. And and I want you to think about that. just let that sink in for just a second. Every State Department level cable communicated around the world for 120 countries. Well, let's go through some of those countries. Every country in Latin America has it. So every time that the CIA said they think there's communist activists in, Brazil, when we overthrew it, Paraguay when we overthrew it, Uruguay when we overthrew it, Chile they know they're not communists. They know everything they're saying.
They probably know Maduro very well may not be the head of the Cartel de Sol or whatever the.
Exactly. Okay. He probably was too smart to buy crypto AG though. Yeah. But Iran bought it. So Mossadegh, when we overthrew him in 1953, crypto AG. Egypt, when we were told that any minute they were going to attack Israel in 1967, so Israel had to do it first. Bold-faced lie, and they knew it because both Jordan and Egypt had crypto AG. They knew everything they said. They knew for a fact Egypt had deployed 75,000 troops down to Yemen because the British had created a skirmish down there to make them do that, to get them out of town so Israel could attack Egypt because they hated Nasser. And that was an attempted overthrow of Egypt. That's all that was. And it was orchestrated, the entire thing, the bombing of the USS Liberty. Every bit of it was orchestrated to bring the United States in to make sure that Nasser got assassinated, overthrown, however it was going to work out. But they wanted Nasser gone. So all of these countries around the world has this communication equipment, and the CIA had hard, fast intelligence on exactly everything that country was doing.
All right. One question as we're going through this is one thing I was thinking about. We talked before this. There's Oklahoma City bombing is kind of my main thing, and then probably my side thing I've kind of been to have a big interest in is kind of like the underbelly of international child trafficking and kind of what everything that kind of goes along with that, and that naturally both kind of ties into Gladio. Now, I kind of want to, I know you seem to focus very much on military history and sources and stuff, and I generally try to do myself, but sometimes we find ourselves what I call peeking beyond the veil, wondering what the hell is going on here. You're like, this is so dark and sinister, like what is going on? And I said, especially I think this note of the child trafficking and such really reveals itself there, and you really get into things like even purported stuff of like satanic ritual abuse, even Satanism and stuff. Probably one of the best examples of this would probably be the Dutroux affair in Belgium. I mean, most notably, people know that as being like children being abducted and stuff, but also right around that same time, there were also bodies being found all the time, which were most likely probably were usually many of them identified and. Let's be real, the archetype of what they were probably mostly women of the night. So point being is there was a whole lot of stuff going on here. It wasn't specifically just pedophilia. It was this whole milieu going on in this realm, particularly in Belgium, also having the Brabant killings going on. The tie that binds here is the gendarmerie. Every one of them, turning blind eyes and such, and there's crossover between the two events. Obviously, this gets into the very tippy top of the royals and stuff, and these the pink ballets and the Pinon affair and all these different blackmail things going across. And you get into things like the X dossier, and it gets absolutely horrifying. And so this is what I'm talking about when you get to peeking beyond the veil. I'm kind of curious, just kind of, I don't know, just where you're at with that. I mean, obviously, I'm not expecting you to have any pronouncements of assertions here. But to me, I think you're probably in the same place as me of like, oh my God, what the hell? These people are evil. But I guess I'm just kind of curious where you're at with that. I mean, generally any thoughts, because I know a lot of people seem to scurry away from that, but I think there's something to that. Maybe a level of hiding absurdity. Maybe this also kind of gets to what we were talking about a little bit, this idea of everyone goes, oh, it's the Jews, it's this, it's that. It's like, it's something else.
Well, obviously, this level of evil is satanic. You can't get away from that fact. Every aspect of this is satanic. And it goes back to obviously this whole Nazism tie although some people like to say, oh, but Hitler didn't do anything to the Catholic Church. Well, the Catholic Church was part of this entire operation. They were the chief money launderer for Chiang Kai-shek's operation in Operation Gladio. But eventually it got so big because it's hundreds of billions of dollars a year in illicit drugs and weapons and humans that they had to create the BCCI Bank, Nugent Hand Bank down in Australia. They have this entire banking infrastructure to handle all of these transactions. They were running women and children out of the BCCI Bank. So it's literally all tied together. I did an entire show on the Dutroux. What you find out is another pattern. So in Chile, there was Colony of Dignity. And if you research that very much looks like the Dutroux thing as well. And what you find is any place that there is a large gathering of, like in Belgium,
there was a rat line community right there too, wasn't it? You kind of skipped over that.
Yes. So when you look at the move from NATO's headquarters being in Paris, after they tried to kill
sorry, real quick for the audience, I don't think we ever describe rat lines. What that is a colloquialism of essentially the Nazis essentially escaping from one area to another, and they're in all that,
smuggling them out in priest robes from the Catholic Church, literally.
Yes.
So when they tried to kill Charles de Gaulle, like the 27th time, Lyman Lemetzger is the NATO commander in Paris. Charles de Gaulle calls him in his office and says, "Get the hell out of my country." He actually removed, and most people don't know this either, he actually removed the French military from NATO, and they did not rejoin until like 2009. So the French military was not even in NATO. But when they kicked NATO out of Paris because they tried to kill him, they moved it to Belgium. And it's not a coincidence that Dutroux was in Belgium, because what you find is anytime there is a large concentration of men, primarily military in this case, but a lot of civilians are involved in NATO as well, they are going to put child trafficking operations as well as women of the night operations for blackmail, because you get single men who get some are absolutely deviant, but others are completely, they drug them at a dinner party, and then they stage pictures with them, and they will use that as blackmail for the rest of their life. So you have all kinds of and you find these large operations primarily around those types of activities. So if you look at the similarities between Colony of Dignity, it not only functioned as a pedophilia ring, but it also functioned as a terrorist training camp. They had padded torture cells in the basement of that facility where they were running with the DINA, which was the Pinochet gets installed as the military dictator in Chile after they murdered Allende. And the DINA operation of kidnapping people and torturing them, they used the Colony of Dignity as a torture facility.
If I recall correctly, wasn't there maybe this is beyond what you maybe is your area of research, but I feel like there's, I want to say like the Hand of Death cult had some sort of connections to Colonia Dignidad or something, but that might be beyond you. But I was kind of poking at a little bit the idea of how some of this seems to leak into even in the cult areas. I mean, hell, you can get into really deep into the weeds with the Church of Satanism, the Temple of Set, other stuff like that, where you go, oh, there's something else going on here too. So
there's connections to all of those things. Mm-hmm. So the Dutroux affair had a lot of similarities to, but the Dutroux affair was the worst one that I've come across. They literally staged hunting in woods of children being hunted. So it was the single worst one that I've come across. And of course, as you articulated, they found dead bodies in his basement when that children had been put in the walls of the basement down there. And so, yeah, that was one of the most horrific ones that I've researched. But I wanted to hit on, and I did watch your show with the lawyer about.
Okay, Kirk Lyons,
so what I want to kind of probably, again, and you guys can think I'm slow, but
Mhm.
I'm like at year 2 of this research, and I'm concentrating on all of these other areas and doing the research. You know, I found stay behind units in Iran before 1953. So your point about Iran is dead on.
Mhm.
They had basically all of the southern tribes in Iran, they had trained to be terrorists inside of Iran, which is how they basically overthrew Mossadegh. But there's a big model to be talked about in Iran, because as soon as we overthrew Mossadegh and reinstalled the Shah, Major General Norman Schwarzkopf Sr., Storm and Norman's dad, was called in. He's a retired major general, and said, "Hey, we got a job for you over here in Iran." He's the guy that went over and created the Savak. The Savak was the intelligence terrorist organization inside of Iran. And all those nice pictures they posed of the 1970s and how life was in, that was not life in Iran. That was life in Iran and Tehran around the Shah. That's not what life was everywhere else. They had prisons all over the place. They had torture terror centers all over the place. And Norman Schwarzkopf Sr. set it all up. He set it all up under the USAID program called Office of Public Safety. And if you just research Office of Public Safety, you're going to find that they were in over 53 countries. Basically, what they did was created a terrorist FBI, National Police Force, and an intelligence operation that worked hand in hand to terrorize every one of the citizens that said a single word against the military dictator or Shah figure that had been installed by the CIA and was controlled by the CIA. So this was done in Chile with Adina. It was done in Uruguay. And in Uruguay, we find Dan Mederone, who was a retired police chief out of Indiana, and Richmond, Indiana, to be specific. And he had went to an FBI training and learned all of this shit. And the Indiana University was in bed with Michigan State University, who created the Phoenix program under the tutelage of the CIA and deployed it to Vietnam. But you find that same kind of Phoenix program-ish kind of stuff in every Office of Public Safety. So Dan Mederone is involved in training the Uruguayan National Police Force under the Office of Public Safety, embedded with CIA. And he ends up getting kidnapped himself, and they kill him.
Yep.
So this is,
I don't know if maybe you said it, but his specific thing was torture, training torture, and then he gets abducted and tortured. I mean, sometimes you go, maybe there is a God.
They didn't actually torture him, though.
Oh, they didn't? Oh, okay.
No, they questioned him. I actually just finished a book recently. They didn't torture him. They killed him. They didn't torture him.
Oh, that was nice of him.
Yeah, the Tupamaros. And so anyway, again, we were told the Tupamaros were communists. They weren't. They were legitimate patriots that did not want a dictator in their country. And the CIA controlled Uruguay, and they wanted him out of there. And that is what you find in most of these countries, is the patriots rise up against the oppression of the newly installed CIA dictator that's giving all of their resources away. And that's the point I want to hammer home. Every single one of these things was to monopolize a resource in a country. We monopolized the oil in Iran when we overthrew Mossadegh. And let me tell you specifically, because I like naming names. Prior to our involvement in Iran, the what eventually becomes BP, the Anglo-American or Anglo Oil Company, whatever it was called before that, had a monopoly on the oil revenues from Iran. They were getting 86 cents on every dollar profit, and Iran was getting 14 cents. All Mossadegh wanted was a 50-50 split, which the U.S. Standard Oil had just arranged with Saudi Arabia. That's all he wanted, 50-50. The British would not give him that. And he ends up being under house arrest for the rest of his life when he was overthrown. And do you know what BP ended up with? 50%. Because do you know who got the rest of that money? Standard Oil. Because Standard Oil, Kermit Roosevelt, the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, was the CIA guy that went in and overthrew Mossadegh for Frank Wisner and Alan Dulles. And they did that so Standard Oil would get the difference. Every single one of these things, the CIA has never worked for the United States. They've never worked for the United States president. They work for an international syndicate to go in and overthrow the government so they can exploit the resources in that company. When we went and overthrown Sukarno in Indonesia, there was a study that a geologist discovered a mountain of gold and the purest oil ever found on God's green earth in Indonesia. They found it in the 1930s, but the Dutch did not have the ability to, it was a Dutch colony. They didn't have the technology and the capability to take it over. And then when Sukarno got his freedom after World War II for the Indonesian people, he was not on board with them exploiting him. So he had to go. They tried to overthrow him once. The CIA got caught. And then they come back and they try to overthrow him and install Suharto. So immediately after the installation of Suharto in Indonesia, the Standard Oil, Dutch, and there was one other country, it may have been the UK, go in and start pumping the oil. Well, basically, they get some kind of slanted deal again where they're getting the majority of the profits. So they send in the CIA anytime they want the resources in the country. They did it throughout all of Africa. Congo, we talked about with Patrice Lumumba, that he had uranium. They wanted all of the uranium. And Patrice Lumumba come to the United States and said, I'll give you all the uranium. I'm just not giving any money to Belgium. Because they were a former Belgium colony. Mm-hmm. And they said, we just want to cut them out. We're not a colony anymore. We want to build some schools and hospitals. We can't do it if we cut them in. So I will deal directly with you. Eisenhower wouldn't meet with him. Vice President Nixon wouldn't meet with him. And so they send him over to the State Department, and he meets with the Secretary of the State. And the Secretary of State told him to pound sand. You're not cutting Belgium out. They're our partner. And so Patrice Lumumba said, fuck you. I don't care. I'm not going to do this. And so he goes home and he tells all the Belgian military to leave. The Belgium comes back and says, well, you can have enlisted people, but I'm keeping all of our officers there. They're going to have to work for me. And Patrice Lumumba goes, I'm in charge here, not you. Get them out. Mm-hmm. And immediately Otto Skorzeny deploys down to the resource area called Katanga, and they start a civil war. They start attacking Patrice Lumumba's forces. And immediately NATO recognizes the Katanga as a separate country. What? I thought we didn't change countries. Yeah, overnight it becomes a separate country until they can kill Patrice Lumumba, and then Katanga becomes part of the Congo again.
Yep.
And that's the part I want to hit home every single time. The CIA is not out there willy-nilly killing people and willy-nilly doing covert operations. They are an arm of the international syndicate. They are the military arm of the paramilitary arm of the and the IMF and the World Bank, they're the economic muscle. This is an all-out war against all of the world's countries for them to own everything and for us to own nothing. That's the point I want to hit home. But I want to go back and talk about
Kirk Lyons, the lawyer head on. Yeah, Oklahoma. I figured maybe you might have some. I'm glad you actually watched that, because I was going to bring it up, because I was like, I figured this would interest you, because this is it was a very unique interview. I don't know how much you know about I know you know some. I know you know something about Strassmeyer. I don't know how much you know the lore of Kirk and stuff. So it was unique interviewing him.
For a second. Yeah. Do you know that his granddaddy was a Nazi?
Who's that? Kirk? Or Strassmeyer? Yeah. His granddaddy was a Nazi. The lore is that he's supposedly was in, I believe, double digits, Nazi party, I believe, member. It wasn't even the triple digits, I think, if I recall correctly. Yeah.
So do you also know that he went back when he left here and worked for the German BND?
So he went back and worked for the BND after?
Yes.
I did not know that, if that was the case, that he resumed operations with the BND upon returning to Germany after the Oklahoma City bombing. And if you do have receipts for that, I would appreciate it, because I haven't heard that. So I did not know that one.
And also, I'm trying to look it up real quick. His dad was a very interesting guy too. Very much involved in Gladio.
Yeah, his dad was what did he work for? He worked for some bigwig. I just can't remember his name right now. Yeah.
Yeah, he worked for the government too.
Yeah. Well, he was like a cabinet member or something, like a very high up. He was like the right hand man of. I forget specifically.
Yeah, he would be in the perfect position to know everything about Gladio in Germany.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think of Kirk's story?
He comes from a Gladio family.
Yeah.
Right. And he just so happens to be involved in a domestic terror event in the United States after I just explained that we have Gladio too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's what's important to me in the context of my research. So in America, it was very important to create a narrative. And the narrative for terrorism in the United States was going to be white, nationalist, Christian terrorist. So when you combine, which your guest did, between Ruby Ridge, right, the gun fanatic, white nationalist, and Waco, the religious fanatic, Christian cult sect, and the military Timothy McVeigh domestic terror bombing, when you combine those three things, what do you get? The white nationalist Christian terrorist.
Yep. Which, frankly, I feel like we're still feeling that till today. I mean, I can feel the culture shifting now, but it's just now shifting. So personally, but I mean, it's just now to where white people are like, not that I'm not particularly a racialist one way or the other, but it's admittedly white guilt and all these other things have been a thing for a while. So yeah.
It started with that narrative. And if you didn't have every single one of those pieces together, you could not have done the entire white nationalist Christian terrorist. Mm. And that's what we saw play out during the Biden administration. Let's just round them all up. When I got off active duty in 2008, I was like, that one FBI list that came out that said, here's all the potential domestic terrorists. I fit like 7 of the 10 categories.
Yeah, most military members did. It was still stuff like insignias of like, don't tread on me and stuff like that, where it's just like every other military member probably has that stupid bumper sticker.
So if I'm going to set up a narrative to classify all of the people that would rise up against a dictatorship in the United States in opposition to one world government, they set the narrative with those 3 events. So no one will ever convince me. And let me give you another kind of weird tidbit. Do you know, it's been confirmed, I mean, it's in the congressional testimony and everything else, that military equipment was used at Waco.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you know where it came from?
No, not specifically. Huh?
Fort Hood.
Fort Hood. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay.
Nearby.
Do you know who was the commander of Fort Hood at the time?
No.
Wesley Clark.
Oh, shit.
Do you know who was the NATO commander during Bosnia? Wesley Clark.
Huh, man, they really do. And he's the guy who has that famous 7 countries in 7 years or whatever. So once again, we talked to Eisenhower earlier, but it's like, I mean, every single time it's always the one they choose to tell you that, well, that's what that is that's their relief valve. That's their relief valve.
Yes.
So,
and that's what I'm telling you. In every one of these research projects, I have to just get up and walk away. I will read this, and now because I know all of the names, I have them all in my notes. All I have to do is do a search, and I'm like hit. Every single time a new name will come up, or an old name that I ran across like 4 times.
we were referencing this Kirk interview I did. Okay, I mean, I don't know if you watched the whole thing, but I feel like anyway, especially if you know the Oklahoma City bombing, the way I did that interview, I felt like I just asked him the obvious questions, and I didn't try to do any sort of gotcha anything. Didn't try to, but it was just like I knew his.
Very.
I know his story. I don't need to. I can just be like, tell me your story and tell me all these people you know, and it's just anyone with a brain can kind of go, something's weird here, and I don't really need to press it. Just imagine, just literally like just looking from what Strassmeyer, what he linked up with Petruski, who supposedly was CIA. Even in that interview, he was like, "Well, I don't think he's CIA, but he does have the story about he stringed up a feller in post World War II." Or like, that is counter intel operations. That's what you were describing. Like, maybe it's not CIA, maybe it's military intel, but tomato. And then like, I mean, just going on, then you have Roger Moore, who, I mean, he didn't know anything about him, but that's another character in the Oklahoma City bombing who worked for civilian material assistance. He was in league with Cuban exiles. He's an FBI informant, a CIA informant. I mean, you go through you go Holloway, which we referenced in that, who was working with Lyons, admittedly, as his right-hand man, and he claims to have worked for, what was it, Air America, I believe. So it's like, I mean, which is a CIA front. It just goes on and on and on. You lose your mind.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where you go, okay, I'm gonna put this down and go garden for an hour because I just like my whole brain just blew up.
Yeah.
You cannot look into Oklahoma bombing seriously and not see Gladio written all over it. You just can't. Every aspect of that was the weapon caches. They just so McVeigh ends up at the hangar where the 9/11 hijackers were training out of. I mean, literally everything about it. The overlap, the logistical support, everything. I was trying to find where I actually talked about his dad, but I'll send you the X post. Because all of that is connected to PACCON.
Yep. Which my theory, and not even my theory, I don't own it, but the idea is that essentially the way that I guess you could say it's Gladio kind of evolves over time, but at least with the Oklahoma City bombing, and I think probably in other ops I see a similar type strategy. I think PACCON was likely to some extent probably a genuine intel gathering operation. I mean, I don't agree with the way it went about things, but I don't think it was trying to perpetrate false flag attacks. But now I mentioned a few people who were CIA, and now so I think what we're looking at is you see one op that might get infected by another. In this way, you get plausible deniability as you exit the op. That's my personal opinion.
I think the entire thing, just like Gladio, was made to look legitimate, and the entire thing was Gladio. 100%. They were stashing weapons at guard armories.
Yeah, that's true. Operation Punch Out and all that, yeah.
How is that not Gladio? The entire concept of Gladio is having weapon caches around the country that you can fall in on. What better place to stash them?
Yeah. Well, okay. I guess I'm just thinking through.
If you look at Gladio, if you just looked at it on the surface, if you went on Wikipedia and you go, oh, well, it was all to fight communism. What's bad with that? It was never to fight communism. I've established that 100%. There was no communism. There was no communism legitimate. Even the Tuta party in Iran. Go back and look at, because I was like, oh, this Tuta party that they claimed was communist. And it may have been communist. But how many people were in the Tuta party? Like 1,000? There were millions of people in Iran. So we went and overthrew a government because there's 1,000 people in the country you didn't like? The Tuta party was no threat. They were no threat to anybody. It was an excuse. Every single one of them, Guatemala, Nicaragua, oh my God, they're all communists. They told us the FARC was communist. The FARC never even talked to a communist. So the entire thing is a lie. And once you get that part, then you have to dig a little deeper and say, well, what were they hiding with the lie? PACCON, to me, was the anti-communist umbrella of legitimacy that hid the actual operation that was being conducted.
I guess the theory I'm trying to articulate is kind of the way I see it with at least PatCon and the way it interacts with something like a Gladio of sorts, is I almost feel like that's like an asset it can tap into. So like there will be operators on the ground in PatCon who their belief of it is they don't think they're any part of any false flag, and to some extent even maybe on to the higher ups of PatCon, this is an intelligence gathering operation, but all it takes is onesies, twosies, little here and there to make a little shift, and you already have essentially these are essentially stay behind units, but then you just put one little actor, drop him in there, and then now he's someone who's a know, and he can make it go live. Like you've already set that thing into play. Yeah, like Strathmire. Yeah.
Yes, that's my whole point.
Mm-hmm.
So let me talk about that for just a second, because you make a very, very important point. So people ask me all the time, because I'm military, well, is all the military then bad that was involved in these CIA operations, like with the Contras and stuff? No, because you really have to delineate between. So if PatCon, the entire concept was bad, and I would argue that it is.
Me too.
It was a false facade. Now, does that mean everybody in PatCon was bad? No, that's your point.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when we were illegally supporting the Contras. The CIA intelligence that was made up said they were communists. So if you get a JSOC guy down there training what are literally terrorists, but they're described as anti-terrorist or anti-communist fighters because we were told the Sandinistas were communist. So you get this gung-ho young 22-year-old buff, Green Beret, whatever, Ranger guy down there, and he's training people to fight communists. That's what he thinks he's doing. He's not doing that. He is training people to be terrorists, to attack a legitimate government that the CIA and the international syndicate doesn't like. So they are using that capability. And that's to your point. Does that mean everybody involved in the operation is bad? No, it does not.
Yeah.
Because they rely almost exclusively on CIA intelligence, which is not intelligence.
Yeah.
It is an agenda to do whatever the international syndicate wants done. United Fruit owned primarily all of Nicaragua. They owned almost all of the arable land there. They didn't use all of it. They didn't want competition. So they had, through corrupt land deals, basically bought the entire country. So you have peasants and you have this elite group that they co-opt into suppressing terroristically the peasants so they can live a life of luxury by sucking up to United Fruit. And when the Sandinistas come to power and kick United Fruit out of the country, they just pick up the phone and call the CIA. Say, hey, I want that government gone. The CIA then produces the necessary intelligence to convince Southcom to go down to Nicaragua and train the Contras in El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala. And they think they're training anti-communist people to take out a communistic government when that's not the case at all. And they hide all of the real information from these people.
I did want to mention, actually, when I mentioned earlier the little info about the Florida swamps and the Everglades, I think I recollect that from my OKC research, because I believe it was purported that McVeigh, I believe, was actually going with Roger Moore to deliver arms to the Cuban exiles in the swamps down in the Everglades. So then that kind of goes more to the idea of like literal stay-behind units that they're training up there.
Yes.
Now the last question I want to bring it to, I think we've kind of done a good job of kind of going through the eras through this. Let's bring it to modern day, and I think probably one of the best examples of kind of what I'm driving at is in how it's evolved. Although when I say it's evolved, the other forms still coexist at the same time. Like we have like the Michigan stuff that's kind of almost like a sort of in the same milieu of the OKC stuff, but then we have what's kind of emerged in the past, decade or so, the rise of the school shooter. And now I would say, or just as the shootings, maybe not necessarily school. I mean, it kind of is a wide range of different things, but generally speaking, it's typically schools. And I don't know if you've really embroiled yourself in this area, but like I don't know, say something like the 09A 764. That's probably one of the best ties in. Yeah, and I know a lot of people are already kind of jumping to that conclusion with this one, which I get. I actually think there's a lot of that does seem to point to that, but it's not conclusive. It's still very early with the most recent shooting over in Minnesota. But even then, that's kind of what people are jumping at, and it kind of, let's be real, kind of fits the patterns. We got a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. Let's be real, the powers that be would love a distraction right now, and this is kind of the perfect distraction for them. And it is, if you look into 764, and then if you its parent... purported parent organization 09A, yes. Its origins very much are in Gladio, which seems to be you know where I'm driving at, and yes. That is kind of leaked in today. That was kind of formed in the post World War II era. Yes. And then at least that's the legend. I think technically speaking, the guy who has the Gladio, if I recall correctly, the guy with the Gladio connections, it does also make a big legend of himself. But many intel people do, so it's kind of like, how do you parse what's real, what's not? But it seems, I think there was some sort of sources that do seem to corroborate his Gladio connections. So aside from just his word,
the part that was in the UK for the 09A, 100%.
Yeah, so I guess thoughts and kind of how it's evolving into today. It's obviously seemingly now coming into the chat rooms. It's even the child trafficking component with a 764. Maybe not trafficking, maybe, but overtly, but maybe at least abuse, because that's leaning into that. I mean, hell, even trafficking. There's been multiple cases of 764 or the COM, or just generally those types of people that have abducted children or rapes and stuff like that. So I mean. These are also people that are committing shootings and stuff. They're literally accelerationists. This whole chaos out of control thing. Their whole modus operandi is creating chaos. Hell, even this current thing going on with the shooting, a lot of what they are about is even tapping into the narrative game. I guess this kind of ties to the idea of like, oh, it's just commies, and like, well, they're kind of playing off that like. That dialectical thing, but on a higher level, almost as if the populace has evolved, and now they're literally intentionally trying to play off the binary dialectic going on. For example, this guy's a tranny, but at the same time, then he's saying like, 6 million wasn't enough or whatever. Like, so people are getting conflicting messages. Is he left? Is he right? Is he what? And then people immediately read into it what they want. I mean, hell, we already literally. I think hours before this, there was a freaking Kash Patel put out with like listed a few different things about like, he said he hates Trump. He said this is right. When you're like, you're missing the point. You're missing the point entirely.
So I have, and Anthony Sutton actually coined these phrases, the Hegelian right and the Hegelian left, right? So if you keep in mind that's a narrative in and of itself. There is no right and left. There's a Hegelian pretend left and there's a Hegelian pretend right. And those are to basically for most people, you like to always think cowboys and Indians. You like to always think there's good guys and there's bad guys.
Black hats, white hats, yeah.
That is not true. There is a group of people, and I kind of used to, when I first started this, I used to joke that the international syndicate, like the Soroses, he's not left. He's just a Hegelian leftist. And then you've got the Koch brothers. They're not right. They all want the same thing. They want to control resources and they want to control us. So they're the Hegelian right.
Hell, even capitalism, communism is that too. Now, I mean, I will admit, my political theory, it depends. Capitalism, it's kind of depends on who's defining it. But generally speaking, I mean, that's literally the Nazi communist kind of dialectic that we're sort of seeing here. They kind of roughly made it this capitalistic or state capitalism or state socialism or communism or whatever, and created this false dialectic. And even as simple as you point out, these corporations. Let's be real. How does the right generally approach corporations? That's good. These are the John Galts of the world, the Howard Rourkes. These are the well-to-do businessmen, the Elon Musks. And then, yeah.
But the Hegelian left does the same thing with their funders,
Yes.
like the Soroses. So that's why I'm saying the entire narrative is bullshit. If you could, excuse me, if you could pretend that they're 3-year-olds and you're playing the game with straws, you know, how one straw was shorter than the other, and that's how you're going to get to pick who's it. I don't know if you did that when you were kids, but we did. You picked like literal straws, like hay straws or grass blades. And if you were going to play a game and you're going to pick who's it first, like hide and seek, whoever got the short one was going to be it. They're literally in a room pulling straws. Everybody that got a short straw is going to be the Hegelian right, and everybody that got a long straw is going to be the Hegelian left. They're in one club. If you go back to the thing, like we just did an entire series on Skull and Bones, they all came out of the same club. Half of them are right, the Hegelian right. Half of them are the Hegelian left. It's a false narrative. It's used to distract us and make us pretend like it's the Cowboys versus the Pittsburgh Steelers back in the 1970s when they were like the two teams that everybody wanted to watch. It's all bullshit.
It's Clinton and Bush slinging drugs in Arkansas. What more can you really say?
Narrative. So if for the last 80 years, the drug explosion, no matter what president was in office, if you just took a narrative, bringing it back to home, to your point, if today we just watched a government that a friend of mine was not at January 6th. He was in California. He made a post on the internet that kind of was associated with January 6th. And he had his house raided by the FBI. He wasn't even in. They found him based on a post. Now, do you want me to believe that that guy that just did that school shooting, they couldn't find that guy in all of the shit that he posted? Give me a break. If they wanted to find these people, they have so much of our information. They know every kid that is messed up in the head. Most of them are under psychological evaluation. Most of them are on prescription medicine. Are you telling me that the world's most intelligence gathering organization that can find the little needle in the grandma with cancer in whatever state she was from that was in Washington, D.C. can't find that kid? I don't buy it. I don't buy any of it.
He was posting his plans, basically. I was covering it this morning. So it's like, he
went and bought 3 guns in close proximity and a shitload of weapons or ammunition for the guns. And that did not raise. I can't go buy a gun, 3 of them in a row, and not draw a red flag in that system. How did that not flag him? So all of those types of things, they want you to believe that that's all possible when it's not possible, while at the same time showing you it's not possible with what they did with January 6th. They can find anybody they want. They can make up a crime on anybody they want. So they have the capability to do this. Where they choose to use that capability is what we should be paying attention to. And that, to me, is the most disturbing part of all of this, is that we are so fixated that there is actually a left and a right when we've been proven over and over and over again. The changes between the Reagan administration, the Bush Sr., Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, not a damn thing changed. The only thing, like opium continued, cocaine continued. And if you are spending billions of dollars in this quote unquote fight against drugs, do you think that you ought to have at least a little bit of a decline in the supply coming into America if you are actually fighting a war on drugs? If you go to Colombia, what you find, every drop of that money was used for, it was not a single drop of it used for fighting the cocaine. It was paying and training to create a national police force in Colombia and terrorists. And those terrorists, we were told, was fighting the FARC. Well, the FARC was basically a representative of the people that had been displaced because of Colombian oil from the oligarchs. And if I have to exploit a company or a country for oil, I might as well, if they have mountains, I'm going to grow whatever drug crop there is, because you can pick between opium and cocaine. So they already had coca down there. Coca was a medicinal plant that was used to make tea and like real medications traditionally for the indigenous people in that area. So, hey, if you've got that and I can make cocaine, we'll go with that. And so you find that every single one of these things. So in the billions of dollars we sent down there in the war on drugs, what we actually created was a 20,000 person paramilitary capability housed in Colombia. And you know what they're using them for now? Rena mercenaries. They're in Ukraine. They're in Africa. So all of these private military contracting companies, they hire third country nationals, primarily Colombia. We trained all of those people to supply to these private military contractors. They are using them. UN uses them as rent a paramilitary security. The State Department uses them. And so we, the people, have paid for this paramilitary capability that both the CIA covertly, but they also use them overtly in private militaries. All of those guys in Iraq, there was Colombians everywhere. In Afghanistan, there were Colombians everywhere.
One example of maybe not directly this, but kind of pointing to what you're getting at, a recent example is Syria. I don't know if you remember the fallout that was going in Syria with the Druze and all the rampant killings between the sectarian violence. And it's kind of confusing of who's doing what, this or that. But when you get down to the crux of it, I believe what really set it off was essentially one group claims that they kidnapped either one or multiple people from their group, and the other one claims the same exact thing. You also have, between the different violence, you have mercenaries all over the place. So you have this crazy obfuscated situation, which I've said from the beginning when I found out what the root cause of the whole skirmish and essentially that Israel then was able to take buffer zones and kind of capitalize on it. It seemed all too convenient that both sides just magically missed some people all of a sudden to me. I don't know. I mean, obviously I have no idea. It could have literally just been one side stole some people from the other and vice versa. But to me, it looks like both people seem genuinely like, hey, what the hell? You took some people? It's like, well, maybe there's a third party here exploiting your sensibilities. I don't know. It's kind of what it feels like. And then you add in the mayhem of these mercenaries, which there were claims by the Syrian government, which I don't know whether it's true or not, that a lot of the supposed sectarian violence was coming from different mercenaries who weren't even technically part of their group. So it's just all this. Now, I don't know what the truth of the matter is, but just pointing to even just the mercenaries itself could kind of create this, they can play off that when they want to. Oh, they're not even from here. So
plausible deniability. Mm-hmm. So what you have, if you zoom out in Syria, it's a resource issue. Mm-hmm. Every one of them boils down to that. So these oil companies around there wanted a pipeline through Syria. So Assad flew to the UK, met with the Queen personally, said, hey, you can build your pipeline. I don't have a problem with your pipeline. You're not bringing British forces to guard the pipeline. My forces will guard the pipeline. You're going to pay me royalties. I have an incentive to guard it and not let anything happen to it. The Queen basically told them to pound sand, kind of just like Lumumba, kind of like Mossadegh, kind of like all of them. So Assad said, okay, well, then you're not going to build the pipeline because I'm not allowing British forces in my country, because every place you show up, the president gets overthrown. So you're not going to be in my country. And so they declared all-out war on Assad. He was supposed to go with the Arab Spring. He was left standing. And so it was full-scale attack on Assad from all forces. Israel, NATO, everybody. They wanted him gone. Well, who shows up? ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Well, where did they come from? Well, they were trained by the CIA in Afghanistan. Both of those two organizations, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, are trained and created by the CIA. They are used by the CIA all over, because once we lost the anti-Soviet, anti-communist boogeyman, they always have to have a boogeyman. From the fall of the Berlin Wall in the late 80s, early 90s, we immediately transitioned with Desert Storm 1 to radical Islamic terrorists. They're in the new boogeyman. So they already created a...
Funny you mentioned Somalia and in the same going into ISIS. We're still there fighting ISIS.
Yes. Okay. So create radical Islamic terrorists in Afghanistan during the 80s, fighting the communists. And so now we have the whole Mujahideen, Al-Qaeda, ISIS birth. And now we have our built-in new boogeyman waiting on the sideline. So the Soviet Union comes down and immediately we got a new enemy. That's not a coincidence. That's called chaos and control. So now they're going to create terrorism because that's going to be the new Soviet threat. And everywhere we go, it's all to fight terrorism. And that's what happened in Syria. We want Assad gone. So we're going to have terrorist events in Syria. So Al-Qaeda comes in, ISIS comes in, and it's all an all-out front to take Assad out. And that's basically all you need to know. It was Israel, it was NATO, it was everybody. And they're going to throw everything they have at him until he's gone, and now he's gone.
All right, we're almost at 2 hours. That's how you know this has been a good episode. So I appreciate your time. I think we'll probably leave it there. I mean, if you have anything else you feel like needs to be added, but I think we did a pretty good job of covering the basics of Gladio. But let people know where they can find you at. Any last thoughts, and we'll get on out of here.
So basically 2 primary places. I'm on Rumble at the Colonel's Corner. That's the name of my Rumble channel. And I do I'm traveling right now. I'm up in Ohio. I live right down the road from you, by the way. I'm in Central Florida too.
Oh, nice.
And so, I normally do shows every day at 4:00. We do books, on this subject. We've done probably 25 different books. I just kind of go through the book. I pre-read the books, check out the author. And if it adds context to Operation Gladio, like we're doing Colombia right now, which is kind of why that's at the forefront of my mind. And basically everything we were ever told about Colombia is a lie, as with every other area that I've researched. And so also on X at Colonel Towner, and you just spell out Colonel.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. We'll have to do something some other time. We definitely have a lot of common interests. But for those who want to support what I'm doing over here, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. If you want to support the show in the best way you can, do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose20. The lowest level is $2. That's where you get access to early episodes. I do about 1 to 2 of those a week. Usually keep about 4 or so of those behind the paywall at any given time. So it's weeks of paywall content. You also get access to the ad-free RSS feed, access to Telegram, access to the pre-show, and priority for the call-ins on me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Are You Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. That goes out on both of our platforms. And the highest level is my sponsors, and I give them a big shout every episode. It's a big thank you for everything they do. And my previous co-hosts on Tower Gang, at Learner to Toad, at Abrogate D's, at ZOVeriCK, at _Invincible, Tim Tuttle, at John Klebold, Will Bell's Delicious Blueberry Rabbit Eye Wine, big fan of the show, Torn May, at Wayne Metaculous, and not Masad, because somebody's a funny goose in my group. And with that, guys, we're out of here. Love you all. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.